shouldn't have been refused by the court.
The Southern African Music Rights Organisation, SAMRO, says it has successfully distributed 242 million rand for the radio and general category for the 2024 financial year, marking an unprecedented surge and a new record. SAMRO in a statement says the 2023 figure was 149 million rand, meaning there was a 62% increase in 2024. It says the significant increase is primarily attributed to SAMRO's high licensing revenue after negotiating more comprehensive licensing agreements with radio stations and general music users. And finally, the leader of the military government in Burkina Faso has appeared on state television in an attempt to quell rumours of a mutiny in the army. It followed reports of gunfire heard near the presidential palace last week. The BBC's Chris Ewoko reports.
Captain Ibrahim Traore has kept low profile since the rumors of mutiny began. On Thursday, he brushed off the speculation but confirmed that some people were injured when a rocket shell landed near the state media center in the capital, Ouagadougou. He did not comment on a claim by an Al-Qaeda-linked group that it carried out the deadly attack on an army base near the border with Niger, but said the army has sent reinforcement troops. The military junta seized control of Burkina Faso 2 years ago, promising an end to the jihadist insurgency. But the security situation has continued to deteriorate.
Recapping the top stories, City of Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis has welcomed the Western Cape High Court's granting of an eviction order to remove homeless people from the CBD. For SAFM News, I'm Anne Musa.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 104.3 FM in Rustenburg.
The Trilidor Ultimate Big Blue Sale is now on. Get amazing discounts on the best security South Africans trust. With over 50 franchises across the country, you can always find a security expert near you. So call 0861 Trilidor or visit trilidor.co.za today. Terms and conditions apply.
Real savings, real benefits. Here's what real clients say about OUTsurance.
My name is Alan. I'm 71 years of age and I live in Douglasdale. I'm paying 554 Rand a month for my 2022 Nissan Magnite.
Want a car insurance premium that'll blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now for a quote. It's quick, it's easy, and it could save you hundreds of rands every month. Here's Amy.
To anyone who has not reached out to OUTsurance, what are you doing? Reach out today.
Blow your mind, not your paycheck. SMS out to 30754 and see for yourself why OUTsurance was voted Best Car Insurer 2023 by the Star and Pretoria newsreaders. Here's Yusuf.
It just shows that OUTsurance is top of the tops when it comes to insurers.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's, and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
Set in a gleaming new high-tech trauma center that deals with only the most serious cases, an emergency medical team must battle through the crucial first hour of care to save lives that hang in the balance. Each distinctive case is told with a thrilling intensity and nail-biting urgency as the team work on the very edge of the medically possible. This is a medical drama like no other. This is Critical. Mondays to Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on S3. Starts 11 June. Channel your best drama with BBC Primetime, only on S3. Open up.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
It's 9 after 10 o'clock. Welcome to the second hour of the show. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be unpacking the statement of intent of the 2024 Government of National Unity. That statement is posted on our social media timeline, and it has been publicly available since last week, Friday. We just thought it would be a good opportunity to actually unpack what it says because of all of the controversy that has been created this week as a result of, is it misunderstandings of what the statement of intent truly means, what is contained in it? And so as we have all of these different debates, we thought it will be good for us to be clear about what is in the statement of intent. So it is available online. It is a 7-page document, but you're only reading 5 pages because the first and the last page are just the opening and it's the cover page and just the last page of the document. So it's 5 pages. And joining us this hour is going to be Professor Nisiba Defo and Dr. Stembile Mbete, who will be unpacking this document with us. Before we get to that, some of the voice notes from the open line.
Hi, good morning, Cathy. It's Nora in Heidelberg. Just off topic. On the news yesterday, there was a gentleman in Durban who launched himself in a parking lot of some shopping mall. And in that whole madness there, I couldn't stop noticing the ANC's election placards still on the poles there. So wasn't it, they were by law, they were supposed to have been removed by now? You see, this is just one example that they are unable to follow rules, and we have laws that are never followed and they are never enforced. Why are they not enforcing their own laws? These election placards are still all over our townships and our towns and everywhere.
Good morning, Cathy. It's here in Pietermaritzburg. It's so disheartening, Cathy, to hear people talking all what they want to say and talking so negatively about this GNU, and in the process they single out President Ramaphosa. Yet this is a collective decision, and he never took the decision on his own. Maybe what we need to do is just to give the GNU the opportunity, and the ANC continues to be the leader of society and the leader of this GNU. It will work. The funny thing is that the people who are so much vocal about this are the people who have left the ANC, who decided that they wanted to vote to remove the ANC from power. It's really, really sad. It's really sad. Thank you, Cathy.
Morning, Katie. He is not a lone actor. But remember, as a leader, the performance of your followers are reflected in your performance. And it's you who, few years ago when the president's performance objectives when it comes to service delivery are being achieved. And if a person is not achieving, he will be retrenched. No, it's not a talk show. We need performance in order to get the service delivery. Thank you.
Morning, Sis Kathy. This is Ngabs Edzibala. On the cabinet or on the ministers, this is my wish. I wish ANC can take international relations, defense, and communication on their side. Then DA take justice so that it can guard them. Finance, they can decide, maybe take ANC and then deputize by DA. The rest, forest and fisheries, they can give to anyone. Maybe also they can give this guy a chance.
Beginning of talks, right, to decide on the exact composition of this government of national unity, and by composition including who would be a part of it, and then how positions and responsibilities would be divided between the different parties and its modes of working. So the negotiations that had been taking place since the election, as far as I understand them, were on agreeing on a basis or a foundation for cooperation in this government of national unity, but all of the other details about how that would take place, what the exact policy program would be, what the ways of work would be, were then to be decided after there was this agreed foundation rule, so to speak. You know, it's like you're going into a soccer match or a netball match. There's an agreed set of rules about how you're going to engage, but then you start playing the game after you've agreed on those rules. So it seems to me that that was the purpose of the statement of intent. What we've seen then in the last few days is it's clear that not every side has the same interpretation of the rules that they have agreed to for this game.
Prof. Defo?
Yes, greetings to Dr. Mbete. My daughter just reprimanded me very strongly that it is not Cathy, it's Cathy. Apologies, madam. Listen.
It's Prof. Defo, is because you always tease me saying Cathy, which is why I let you get away with it. Go for it.
All right, thank you. Look, some time back, I think in the Citizen, I wrote, and it reflected a few times, the idea of CODESA 2. We are where we are, and that tells me that's where we should have started. Once the ANC lost power and became gracious and magnanimous in that though we could go it alone, even with a minority government, we want to be inclusive. Maybe they should have sat under a marula tree and laid down the rules of engagement and then came up with an enforceable agreement. Because what we have is a statement of intent, and it remains exactly that. And now is subject to various interpretations that are not helpful and that are already muddying the water. And we need a framework. There's no doubt about that. And I'm glad and I'm happy and I congratulate the ANC for this magnanimity. But surely something ought to have gone before they went public. It takes much more time, like in many other areas where they came up with a government of national unity, to discuss and to agree. Ours was done within almost a week or so. Maybe we're a bit hasty.
One of the things, Professor Defo, that you've mentioned is the enforceability of this agreement, and that seems to be at the crux of the contestation, even when we are looking at whether there's misinterpretation of what this document truly is. There have also been some suggestions that if there's no agreement, then one of the parties, i.e. the DA, could well take the ANC to court for breaching the terms of this agreement. As far as you understand it, I mean, would it be enforceable to that extent? No. Would the parties be able to take each other to court to say, well, we agreed to all of this, and you are now saying that, well, we agreed to it in as far as we were going to form a government. We have not yet formed a government, so some of the clauses that are contained in this document do not yet apply.
On a simple reading of the document and understanding thereof, I don't think you can enforce it. It is legally enforceable. If you like, let's call it a gentle ladies' agreement. Okay? And it needs the bona fides of mature adult people who put at the heart of it all service to the other, service to the people, altruistic leadership, servant leadership. If that becomes a defining trait of those who have signed and are still willing to sign. Yes, it is possible. Yes, it is workable. But leave the law aside. If they cannot agree on a simple interpretation of clause 24, and the next thing you want to involve the courts, and then you say they are biased, they are partisan, and they are embedded, please let them go and sit under a marula tree and clean this document and make it legally enforceable document.
Let's get then into what the actual document says. Of course, it begins with this preamble, talks about, the history of this country, the national elections, what it is that the parties strive for. But perhaps it's just at clause number 5 where things begin to get interesting, because there it talks about how this formation of a government of national unity will take place. And it's through it's a voluntary process. So each party that is part of the government of national unity is a party that volunteers to be part of this government. Is that by and large not what has happened with the interest that has been raised from beyond just the three parties that are seen as the core, so the ANC, the IFP, the DA, but with the PA, the FF+, the PAC, and others that have sort of raised their hand to say, actually, we are willing to get behind this. Why do you think it's causing so much controversy, Ste?
Look, I think that there's been this discussion, and you and I have had this conversation around, is this a government of national unity? Was it intended to be a grand coalition? So where, a government of national unity includes the most of the parties that, or beyond this particular threshold of parties that are in a legislature, in our case in the National Assembly, whereas a grand coalition is that arrangement or that kind of coalition that is between the two biggest parties, maybe the three biggest parties, even if they have ideological differences within a country and within a particular parliament. And so this discussion around what exactly is this intended to yield at the end, right? What's the overall outcome that's expected, I think, is at the heart of the disagreement on what that Section 5 actually means. Because it seems as though that particularly the DA imagines this as that the voluntary agreement is primarily between the ANC and the DA, then with the IFP, and then all others will be invited on the basis of the agreement between these two parties. Whereas the ANC's interpretation of it is that, no, this was an invitation that's open to everyone. And so that idea of participating voluntarily in this, that all the parties that have participated in the 2024 elections, this is open to everybody to volunteer to be part of it and to be involved in this government of national unity. And so the idea basically of where is the center of this agreement, is it centered on the ANC and the DA and then with others sort of around them, or is it centered on the ANC and then all others coming into it on the basis of the invitation that they've received from the ANC?
Prof. Defo, is it as ambiguous as the DA would have us believe? From the onset, it has been stated publicly that it was the ANC that was inviting parties to be part of this government of national unity. At no point, even on signing this agreement, did the ANC ever say that the doors were closed off to any other parties joining this agreement?
Yes. There is the letter of the document and there is also the spirit thereof. You cannot, I listened very carefully to Madame Zille after Secretary General spoke, Balula. And I think he referenced the document, and you cannot fault her. You cannot, unless you are partisan, and I am not. The simple reading of the document and what he quoted was very simple and unambiguous. I had, is it Nduli, the chief whip? I heard him speak, and I said, what brilliant thoughts that he is articulating. But they are not encapsulated in the document. It's not what Section 24 says. I don't disagree with him, but it's not what Section 24 says. And hence I say, they should go and sit down and start afresh, start de novo. The spirit is good. I support that. But that document is going to create problems for them because they are not agreed. They are not at idem as to its interpretation even before they take off.
If we get a bit then deeper into the clause, it's very clear that from the onset, whoever forms part of this government of national unity is committing to cooperation in both the executive and the legislature. That is prescribed by this within this statement. So that is what parties then are effectively signing up for. Stay?
Yes, so the parties what the document, let me just look at it, reopen it up now, but the way that it is framed is that all the parties that are going to be part of the GNU will cooperate in the executive and the legislature, and that will be decided over, the broader negotiations. There's this basic minimum program of priorities around sort of agreeing in broad terms what the agenda of the GNU would be, but then that will be decided after the formation of the GNU in a Lekgotla, in a strategy kind of session, to then decide the specifics of it. I think that the questions around, and as Prof. Tefo has said, around who actually would sit at the table, and that this idea that the composition of the GNU would be discussed by the existing parties, and at the point that this was signed on the 14th of June, the existing parties were only the DA and the ANC who had signed it. We'd heard from the IFP that they would be part of it as well. And this then seems to be the nub of the issue of this disagreement amongst the parties. I do think that despite the fact that this is not a legally binding document, I don't think that there would be any basis on which this could be challenged in court, right? And it would be a waste of the court's resources. I think is an expectation of kind of good faith in the interaction, that people behave according to, as Prof said, the spirit of the document. But what is curious to me is that these are things, if you think of the period when this was being negotiated, before last week's first sitting of the National Assembly, we received very few leaks. We didn't really know what was happening until quite soon, actually, before this first sitting of the National Assembly. It then seems curious to me that you would have all of this now playing out in public instead of being engaged behind closed doors. I mean, if you disagree on what the interpretation was, just pick up a phone. And say, look, we need to meet, we need to sit down, and we need to discuss this. Okay. And so there is something that is saying around kind of, what's going wrong with the way that these parties are working with each other.
We're going to continue the conversation in a moment. Time for the latest headlines.
Good morning. In the headlines, IEC Commissioner Dr. Nomsa Masuku has been granted 20,000 rand bail by the Specialised Commercial Crimes Court sitting in the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court. The 62-year-old was arrested earlier this morning by the Hawks for fraud amounting to 1.2 million rand. The ANC Youth League president has urged President Cyril Ramaphosa to consider appointing young people as ministers, deputy ministers and MECs to form a stable government. And the Eastern Cape Liquor Board has called on communities to assist in preventing underage drinking. I'll have details on these and other stories at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 17 rand 97 to the dollar, 22 rand 75 to the pound, and 19 rand 21 to the euro. Markets in Asia were weaker at the closing bell. The JSE is mixed in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are red across the board. Gold is trading at $2,364, platinum $978 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $85.53 a barrel.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to the Talking Point. This hour on the show, we are unpacking the statement of intent that has been signed between the DA, the ANC, and the IFP when it comes to forming a government of national unity. It was the document signed literally just before the first sitting of the National Assembly last week. My guest this morning, Dr. Stembile Mbete, who is a lecturer in the Department of Political Sciences at the University of Pretoria, and Professor Lisiba Tefo, who's a political analyst and based at UNISA. So we're still then unpacking the reach and the extent of this framework. And you asked some interesting questions around why all this is playing itself out in the public eye. I'm going to ask us to park that for a moment. We're going to come back to it. But Professor Tefo, again, for the parties that want to be part of this government of national unity, it seems from this document that they must be willing to cooperate across the board, the executive, the legislature, and that doesn't seem to be optional. Is this part of the reason why some opposition parties see this as a way of co-opting and potentially weakening their position when it comes to the legislative arm?
Yeah, I think it's a good one. For as long as it is seen in terms of what is in it for us as individuals and parties, it is bound to be problematic. Because you would say, rightly so, the IFP, DA, NAC have numerical strength in terms of electoral verdict. Okay? So they must get a sizable share, a reasonable share, as per their electoral support. That is just common sense. But I know people would want to look at differently. And the things that happened, by the way, in Johannesburg, where that you don't have a vote or it's less than a quarter or a fraction of a percent, then you can lead a metro like Johannesburg. Those are aberrations of democracy. And the reason why some people are being protective, they're saying, let the voice of the electorate be seen to be represented in terms of how we share the cake. And I think that is rational. That for me, it makes sense. And maybe they might have. It's a pity they were in a hurry to come up with this document and to go public with it. Angela Merkel. Some people don't know this much about it, by the way. She led Germany for 15 years, a leading economy in continental Europe for 15 years. She could take 4 months negotiating a government of national unity. But there will be no friction, no failure of service delivery, precisely because the public servants there are not politicized. The public servants there are appointed and not deployed. So the tension that there is, it's about what am I going to get in this. I heard Mackenzie last night, and I found it extremely regrettable what he said. If I don't get power, then I'm out of it. That's the mindset.
The other point that comes out quite strongly in this document is the need for all parties to reaffirm the value of the Constitution. It's there in the preamble, and it's also there in what they describe as the foundational principles of the GNU. So respect for the Constitution, absolutely. Non-racialism, non-sexism, already, were faced with a situation where the ink had barely dried on this document, where, of course, the DA then faced a scandal with its MP who has been accused of racist behavior, racist language. Does how the Democratic Alliance respond to that now? Does it matter more in the context of a government of national unity?
Certainly. Remember that a government of national unity is as strong and as unified as its component parts, right? So it's both a sum of its parts and greater than the sum of its parts. So if each of the parts has some kind of structural weakness or some kind of issue in it that affects its operation or its integrity, it can undermine the GNU as a whole. And so in the case of the DA currently, and the way in which they deal with Ronaldo Gous and his very racist, videos and statements and kind of general outlook, will determine kind of how much the citizens feel that they can trust in the integrity of the GNU as a whole. Because, as you say, the principles that it's supposed to be, that are meant to be the foundational principles of the GNU, amongst them have non-racialism and non-sexism. And this is particularly important in a context where there are fears and legitimate fears amongst some in the population that this GNU is actually just a way of sneaking in a regression in whatever progress has happened in South Africa on race since 1994, it's kind of sneaking that in through the back door. And so as a confidence thing, because we know that a lot of politics is as much about kind of the substance as it is the perception of whatever decisions are being made. That the perception of the DA dealing with this decisively will be important in how seriously people take the DA's intentions to progress South Africa and not regress it to the past. We know that some of the sometimes unfair rhetoric around the DA is that, no, it's going to bring back apartheid through the back door. And then when you've now got an example of somebody who in many ways is nostalgic about apartheid, you need to show decisively that you don't agree with it in order to challenge those perceptions.
And right under this the issue of or the principle of non-racialism and non-sexism, Prof. Def, was one that then speaks about social justice, redress and equity. And these are, again, what the partners and the parties are committing themselves to upholding. Now, just on that alone, social justice, redress and equity, you can't have that conversation within the context of these different political parties and not automatically anticipate different interpretations of what exactly that will mean.
Yes. Again, what comes first? The interest of the nation, the interest of the people, the wretched of the earth. If that is put at the center of all that our political leadership are trying to do or are going to do, they are likely to find each other. Before I expand on this one, let me go to the notion, the issue of racism and the host and them. I just wish we could let bygones be bygones. Because if you do that, you are saying to me, you are looking at a sky and you turn it into a wound. And if you could keep looking at it, it will fester. Africans sometimes are in their element when we discuss racism. And sometimes we forget that even Africans can be racist. And now we have a judgment, I think 35 years, where black brother took black brother, and then the judgment is there before somebody wants to attack me. There is a judgment in South Africa on that score. And then number two, there was a young man or a man who once kept on singing, kill the farmer, kill the Boer. You know that? And now it's outlawed. are we going to retrospectively fault those who are in parliament today, who are singing that, and say, guys, once upon a time you did this? Can we just accept we have got a fractured past? But if we are beholden to it, we won't move forward. And many countries that people call Asian tigers went through what we went through. But they at least were adult enough to say, you know what, guys, let's move on. Now, coming to this of equality...
Prof. Tefo, before you go on, what does "so let's move on" mean? So, does "so move on" mean that a member of parliament recorded making numerous statements using the K word
17 years ago, 19 years ago, and how many, if we're to be honest and objective, and then let's go and do some research. Let's assign 1 or 2 students to go and look at those. Many might not come back into that parliament.
So what are we to believe then? That that an individual like that can reform, that they no longer hold those views?
Otherwise, we wouldn't have the systems we have as a nation. I mean, we even have paroles because we recognize that a person can be rehabilitated. And there are others who are incorrigible, by the way, who cannot. But to a priori say there are certain people of certain color who are incorrigible, I'm sorry, I cannot align myself with that. I am for truth, no matter who's saying it, and I'm for justice, no matter who it is for or against.
Okay, Prof. Tefo, you've made yourself loud and clear. You were still going to come back to the issue of redress and equity and how then these partners or these parties, that is potentially another area of misinterpretation.
You see, the question of redress and equity, many would say just remove it from the nomenclature because we believed in it, we embraced it, but we have never benefited out of that in the past 30 years. The noble intentions behind those were betrayed by the political actors, by the compradors. Hence, the people voted with their feet. We have got good policies, well-intended policies. The authors thereof, their bona fides were not in doubt. But please, let's acknowledge that somewhere we failed. And where there is need for redress, so be it, but genuinely so. And it must be across the board and for everybody, not for the limited and connected few.
When we look further down that list of principles, I was struck by this because I thought, well, this is going to get interesting. It talks about principles of evidence-based policy and decision-making, but also a professional, merit-based, non-partisan, developmental public service that puts people first.
Good.
I'm glad you had that little giggle because that's how I felt when I read it. I thought, okay, well, this is where it's going to hit. The tire hits the tar.
Look, I think, Cathy, we must acknowledge that there has been for a number of years an attempt, particularly out of the National School of Governance, to introduce a professionalization policy into the public service. There was a professionalization white paper that I think was agreed to by Cabinet last year, I think, or the year before. And so there have been these attempts, right, to have this national framework towards the professionalization of the public service accepted by and adopted by the government particularly for application at the national and the provincial level. We know that the local government sector is governed under a different kind of framework. And the inclusion of this in this agreement, I think, has been an important one and will be important for actually ensuring the implementation anticipation of the work that has been started around professionalization. Prof. Defo made an important point earlier when he was discussing the coalitions that Angela Merkel oversaw in Germany, which is that even though those coalition negotiations could take some time, the state would continue functioning. The public administration would continue functioning because the public administration was insulated from the politics of the day. Belgium, for example, went over 400 days, well over a year, without a government because they couldn't agree on a coalition. But, the train still ran, the police were paid, the hospitals kept functioning because the public administration, the civil service, was insulated from the from the political machinations. And what we have is that because we've developed such a politicized civil service, if the politicians catch a cough, the whole government has a cold. And so this is an important thing to include in order to build the structure within the state that will basically prevent or insulate the operation of government from from political tensions and any political drama. So I know we're very cynical about it as South Africans because we've been so disappointed by the public administration, and we are witness to a lot of state failure in the way that the administration runs. But I think I was happy to see the inclusion of this clause because it is the only way that the country will survive kind of coalition politics, which is an inevitable outcome, right, of our electoral system. The only way that you do survive it in a way that doesn't undermine service delivery, that doesn't undermine the well-being of the people in the country, is by insulating your administration from the politics.
While the efforts have been made through the Public Service Commission, as you're mentioning, Stay, to professionalize public service and administration, how it has been happening has been quite slow. Professor Defo, many of these positions are also positions that have been seen as a part of extending the networks of patronage. When we talk about a policy of cadre deployment or cadre deployment, it would also very much sit within, the space of the public service. How do you realistically see this being enforced? Because these are also people that the ANC will be well aware of, that they need to keep happy.
I'm not ambiguous on this one because I never gave it a chance. I've heard this song about professionalization, and I said it then and I'm repeating. It will never ever succeed as long as you still have policies like cadre deployment on the records of the ruling party and others. That's number one. Number two, do you still have the ruling party willing to go to court in defense of cadre deployment? And I'm not talking about people aligned to the party being appointed. I'm talking about the South African understanding of cadre deployment. But China is where it is, if I may, madam, where it is exactly today because of 3 points. And they call it MPI, meritocracy, right? Appointing people on merit. Number two, then they talk about pragmatism. They are neither socialist or communist. They look at what works and embrace that and move forward. That's what defines China. Lastly, integrity. Integrity. Appoint men and women whose integrity is beyond doubt, whose commitment, who altruistic, who are about the other and not the self.
Okay.
That's what put China where it is today. Is it impossible? No, it is doable. That's why it is enshrined in the statement of intent, because it is doable.
Professor Defo will continue in a moment.
SABC Sport delivers a warm blanket this June.
3 teams are playing their hearts out in the PSL promotional playoffs, all hunting for a special ticket to the Big Boys League of Ibhola laseMzansi.
The queens of the beautiful game kick like real champs in the Hollywood Bet Super League.
Foot Afrique brings you up to speed on African football, while Final Analysis wraps up your weekend.
LFC TV is the ultimate destination for Liverpool FC fans, while Sport at 10 keeps you awake on Wednesdays.
Dive deep into comprehensive analysis of the world of boxing on the TKO.
The Journo's podcast brings together top sports journalists for engaging conversations and expert insights.
Countdown to Paris brings you up to speed on the build-up to the Olympic Games Paris 2024 on Saturday evenings.
There's action galore in the world of SABC Sport, Boxing World Weekly, NBA Lifestyle, Youth Sport Show, Goats Like Us, Racing 92 and many more. Happy Youth Month.
Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Are you ready to buy or build your first home or buy a stand anywhere in South Africa? If you are a South African citizen, you and your spouse have never benefited from a government housing subsidy program, and your household income is between 3,501 and 22,000 Rand per month, your dream can be realized by applying for a First Home Finance subsidy. To apply, just log into the First Home Finance application online portal at firsthomefinance.co.za or call a call center agent on 010-085-2199 to assist you for free with completing your First Home Finance online application. Beware, applying for First Home Finance subsidy is free. Do not pay anyone when applying for the subsidy. The NHFC is an agency of the National Department of Human Settlements.
SAFM Youth Month Takeover. SAFM invites young people between the ages of 18 to 35 to take over the airwaves this Youth Month. All you have to do is send a WhatsApp voice note or text message to 061-410-4107 or email info@safm.co.za. Tell us which show you'd like to co-host and what the 2 compelling issues facing our 30 years of democracy are, and we could be calling you. Terms and conditions apply.
Shop till you drop once you get the best insurance premium, just like 53-year-old Candice, who pays only 766 Rand per month on her grey 2022 Suzuki Vitara Brezza GL with Outsurance. With cheaper premiums, she can afford to go shopping. SMS out to 30754 for an Outsurance quote. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, I don't know where the time has gone, but we've got 5 minutes left of this conversation. We are looking at the statement of intent by the Government of National Unity. Professor Lisiba Tefo and Dr. Stembile Mbete have been my guests for this hour. James, you are in Johannesburg. I'm going to ask you to keep it brief. Good morning.
Morning, Cathy. Look, I think that, on the question of racism, I think that black people are entitled to be angry. I mean, if black people are going to be bygones, let the bygones be bygones. In what context? I don't agree with Professor Tefo, I'm saying that, black people have the right to be, actually, black people must go out and be angry. Because if they're not angry, it will breed complacency. Do you understand? So I'm very skeptical about, for as long as DA is harboring this kind of people, I'm very skeptical about this coalition. I'm just thinking that, people are right when they say that it is going to smuggle out racism within the present, We need to fight racism, whatever it emerges, Okay. And another question, lastly, who's we? I mean, who's we? I don't think that black people must speak on behalf of other black people. It is affecting us differently. Others are elite, others are poor. They have nothing because of racism. We can never allow us to be complacent, DA didn't treat this matter properly. They should have dismissed that guy instead of just, telling us that they obey the rule of law while the person is such a vile, and very serious racism against black people. Okay. Black people must go out and be angry about this thing.
All right. Okay. James, out in Johannesburg. Dumisani in Midrand, good morning.
Good morning. My view is very straightforward. There will never be a racial and economic justice in this country because black people are such apologists. They tolerate racism. They are the first to defend the racist. everywhere, people like this Prof on studio and everywhere. Whereas the Jews today, they're still talking about Holocaust. They are still asking for justice, but people move on. We are such a shame to ourselves and future generation the way we behave. We are such apologists. This is disgusting to black people. We need to look at ourselves in the mirror. History will judge us harshly. We are such apologists.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dumisani out in Midrand. Prof, let me give you a chance to respond because it
yes,
had largely to do with your
yes.
comments.
I anticipated the response, and I just want to cut it short. The man who spent 27 years in jail, when he came out, if I harbor this bitterness, I cannot help my country move forward. The man who spent 27 years in jail, called Nelson Mandela, he's the one who said, let bygones be bygones. And I'm not saying we must forget, but I'm saying we must not be beholden to the past. And we try to move forward. I mean, those who want to lecture me about apartheid, some of them were not even born in 1994, or they were 10 years old in 1990. They've never lived under apartheid. They've never experienced it. They read and heard about it. Yes, let's not forget. But certainly, let us not be beholden to the past. Otherwise, South Africa won't move forward.
Okay. Stay. As we get ready to round up this conversation, of course, what has been in the public space this past week has been interpretation of 24. But Clause 24, what I think is going to be under sharp focus this weekend is going to be then Clause 16, 17 and also 18, which is really around the need for the president, when appointing members of the executive, to consult leaders of the respective parties in the GNU and for there to be consensus within the GNU, even though that still needs to respect his role as the president and his constitutional right to make whatever decisions he needs to make in appointing the executive.
Yes, indeed. And I think that there is, we also know that the statement intent, one of the founding principles is constitutionality, right? And so the idea around the extent, how much consultation is expected from the president in the establishment of the executive, while also recognizing that the only person with the legal right and the constitutional right to form a cabinet currently is Cyril Ramaphosa, who was inaugurated as the president on Wednesday. And so we are going to have a very interesting weekend. I think that the hope for the country is that this can be done without having, without the parties playing off against each other in the media, as we've seen in the last week, because it just creates tension and uncertainty, and really a sense of insecurity for South African citizens.
Does it not run the risk of being unconstitutional?
No, I mean, what the Constitution says is that the president, executive authority is vested in the president, and the president then shares that authority with a cabinet of ministers, including the deputy president. How the president then chooses to do so, how he gets to the point of choosing who is going to have in the cabinet, is his prerogative, right? I hope one day we'll say it's her prerogative, but it's their prerogative how they decide to share that. So if they decide to share that through a process of consultation, they can do that. That's not unconstitutional. I think the expectation, though, that the president, that nothing will be legitimate if the president does not consult, I think is the problem. And it's this issue again of interpretation. But that the president chooses to consult, all the presidents have always consulted on who they're going to put in place, whether they consulted within their own parties or outside of it. I think that the big issue is that for the broader agreement of the GNU to hold, what is then going to be traded off in order to achieve that.
All right. As always, so much to talk about, such little time. We are at the end of the hour for this conversation, slightly late for news. It's just after 11 o'clock.
In our top stories, IEC Commissioner charged with fraud and Eastern Cape communities urged to assist in preventing underage drinking. Good morning. IEC Commissioner Dr. Nomsa Masuku has been granted 20,000 rand bail by the Specialised Commercial Crimes Court sitting in the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court. The 62-year-old was arrested earlier this morning by the Hawks for fraud amounting to 1.2 million rand. She's a former employee at Standard Bank and as head of the bank's CSI program for the Adopt a School Trust, she allegedly flouted processes by awarding scholarships to friends and family members. Masuku also allegedly deposited some of the monies into a personal bank account without the approval of the Trust Committee. The matter has been postponed to the 4th of September. The ANC Youth League President Colin Malachi has urged President Cyril Ramaphosa to consider appointing young people as ministers, deputy ministers and MECs to form a stable government. He was addressing the media on the League's response to the Government of National Unity at Luthuli House in Johannesburg. He says the League supports the GNU.
We applaud the ANC for its strategy on an inclusive approach in forming government of national unity. This decision reflects the ANC dedication to unite and stability and progress. The ANC League will not compromise on policies that are critical in advancing the revolution, policies that contradict the principles.
The Eastern Cape Liquor Board has called on communities to assist in preventing underage drinking. This after the board received reports of high levels of underage drinking in Mthatha, Buffalo City and Nelson Mandela Bay. The call comes just a few days before the second anniversary of the Enyobeni Tavern tragedy where 21 teenagers died after attending a pens down event. The Eastern Cape Liquor Board spokesperson Mgwebi Msia.
Our focus really is more on these three areas to ensure that we conduct also regular inspections. These liquor outlets are based in the communities and communities would know what is actually taking place with regards to how, they conduct themselves, etc. So we also try our best to mobilize different stakeholders within communities so that they can also become part of our efforts to promote responsible trading, but also to prevent underage drinking in these areas.
The Pretoria High Court has postponed the pre-trial conference on the multi-million rand corruption case against the former Department of Correctional Services Commissioner Linda Mti, former DCS Chief Financial Officer Patrick Gillingham and former Bosasa Chief Financial Officer Andries van Tonder to the 7th of August. This is to allow for all outstanding documents to be provided prior to the set date. The accused include former Bosasa Chief Operations Officer Angelo Agrizzi, who attended the trial virtually due to ill health. The charges are in connection with 4 tenders allegedly awarded to Bosasa and its subsidiaries, valued at over 1.8 billion rand between August 2004 up to 2007. The Investigative Directorate spokesperson Henry Mamutami.
Angelo Agrizzi will, however, be tried separately in the same matter, owing to his ill health, and he attended proceedings virtually. Meanwhile, Linda Mti, Patrick Gillingham and Andries van Tonder will be tried together. The three are expected back in court on the set date, while Agrizzi will continue to attend proceedings virtually.
City of Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis has welcomed the Western Cape High Court's granting of an eviction order to remove homeless people from the CBD. The order prohibits the unlawful occupation of public spaces in the city centre from the 1st of August this year. Hill-Lewis says they've provided dignified shelters at the city's safe spaces.
We have built what we call the city's safe spaces. So they are kind of dormitory style accommodation with bunk beds. They provide 2 hot meals a day. They provide a social worker on site to offer care every single day. They offer a nursing sister once a week, referrals for addiction treatment and alcohol and drug treatment. They offer a whole lot of training programs for job finding and helping to get your ID book and so on. So they are actually really wonderful facilities, and we've built a lot of them the last 2 years precisely with this in mind.
U.S. military authorities say the floating pier off Gaza has been re-anchored to allow resumed delivery of U.S. humanitarian aid to the Strip. The temporary structure has been beset by controversy, with aid organizations saying a more effective way for supplies to reach the territory would be for Israel to open more land border crossings. The World Health Organization's Dr. Margaret Harris.
We need to be able to move the aid in and move it in safely to all people wherever they are all the time. Now remember, Gazans used to grow their own food, but they can't now. Most of their farmland's been destroyed. So we also need to be able to move in health workers and move patients out. And so we've been asking for our movements to be guaranteed safe at all times and to be able to take place across all the routes and crossings. The delivery of aid to the civilian population in war is protected by international humanitarian law. So it should be the rule, not the exception.
Recapping the top story, IEC Commissioner Dr. Nomsa Masuku has been granted 20,000 rand bail by the Specialized Commercial Crimes Court sitting in the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court. She was arrested for fraud relating to a time as an employee at Standard Bank. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 106.6 FM in Bloemfontein.
Hey, what's up, South Africa? Mzansi Msizi Shembe from Metro FM. Do join me on Saturday at 6 p.m. as I'll be on Deal or No Deal Celebrity. Looking forward to see you there.
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. We buy cars, we buy cars.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
Get ready for an exciting show. Believe it, family. It's a big day for 25K. In this brand new show, join us as we follow couples across South Africa on their journey to create their dream wedding for only 25K.
Our biggest hope is that everything fits in the budget of 25K.
There were many things that we had to do in 3 days' time.
We'll share in their disappointments.
It's also stress. Somebody let me down early this morning.
It's a really expensive trip. I don't know how we're going to afford to fly this trip.
And celebrate their triumphs.
I always dreamed of this day, but ke sa tsebe hore na e tlo phethahala jwang.
Thank you to everyone that made this day.
A big day for 25K starts the 9th of June, Sunday, 7:30 p.m. only on SABC2.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
absolutely beautiful music for the soul, and it's really just a reflection of the work of the artist that is joining us this hour on the Friday Wind Down, a leading guitarist on the continent whose interpretation of the kora, whose love for the kora has really taken him to at least 4 of the continents that we have, and brought him before kings, before presidents, before all sorts of royalty and dignitaries, and no doubt about why that would be the case. Derek Gripper, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on the Friday Wind Down this morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to join you on the Friday Wind Down. I can't believe it's Friday.
I know, right? The week has just sort of flown by, and it's been quite chaotic, but I won't lie, I'm quite excited to be wrapping up the week with you today.
Wonderful. Yeah, we're on the last leg of our 3-leg South African tour together, me and Balake. So we finished Durban. We just had some wonderful shows in Cape Town, and we are in Johannesburg, which is just wonderful. I mean, you guys, the weather here is great. It's really marvelous. Cape Town's, it's a little bit more gloomy down there.
And yet we are complaining about the weather. So you're one of the few people who will say the weather has been great, Derek. We've all been crying about how cold it has become suddenly. And I understand that Balake is with you. He's sitting right next to you.
He's just over. He's a little over away, so I could go and say, get him to say hi if you'd like.
No.
How's your French?
Terrible, non-existent. We can try.
Like
we can try and do that perhaps a little bit later, so that we don't interrupt the show. But Derek,
okay.
I wonder, because you make the music, right? Does it move you the way it moves everybody else who hears it, who listens to it, who gets to sit down and appreciate it fully?
That's a good question, Cathy. Because there's this thing called the music industry, and it's run by people who aren't musicians, and they all have theories. This works, this doesn't work. If you want to reach audiences, this is what you must do, and I've always had one, thing that they say, and then I go and I play to people, and I discover that if you play people music, they love it. They respond, because the guitar, what I do is, it's a beautiful instrument, and the music, people respond because we're all wired to respond to music. It's in our DNA. So they absolutely do respond to that. So, yeah, and that's kind of what we tap into.
Derek, you are a classical guitarist, but of course, you're well known for your interpretation of the traditional harp, the kora. Where do the guitar and the harp meet for you?
Well, in mechanics, they meet first, in that they're both there we go. Sorry, they're both nylon stringed in their modern way. So the way that we pluck the string is similar, and then they meet because 20 years ago I discovered the music of the kora. First, from the music of Tumani Diabate, the great kora player from Mali, and straight away, if you discover Tumani, you discover his neighbor who grew up next door him, Balake Sissoko. So I started translating this music onto the guitar, because I couldn't let them have all the fun, And so this has been a long journey to create a repertoire on the guitar, because I could play the guitar. I went to university and learned the classical guitar, but I wasn't listening to the music of the classical guitar. And I was listening to music from this continent. I was listening to Brazilian music. So I needed to find what it is that I wanted to do with this skill that I'd been given, this opportunity to play this instrument. And, the kora has been a big part of that puzzle of how to use the guitar in a different way.
You speak about it, and perhaps you've also done it so effortlessly that if one is to transfer, as you have done, the kora repertoire into just the ordinary guitar, what does it actually take? And explain it for people who aren't musicians but who would enjoy music, so that it makes sense, just the magnitude of what you have done.
So the first thing is I listened to a CD. I don't know if you remember those little things. I was given a burnt compact disc. Those of us who were born pre-21st century. And I listened to this kora, and it was just this flurry of notes that even as a so-called trained classical musician, I had no understanding of what was going on. So I just listened and listened. And the first thing I did is I heard that there's an accent to the music. There's a way, if you have a melody, even if it's Happy Birthday, there's a way that the kora would play Happy Birthday. It has a particular accent, like every language has an accent. So the first thing I did was I copied that accent, but not playing the kora music because I couldn't, but playing the music that I played already. So I learned how to make the short, sharp, rhythmical notes, how to make the notes sort of flurry along, all of these things. And then about 8 years later, that wasn't enough. So then I started slowing the music down and writing it down note for note. So listening at this particular second, what note is being played? Oh, there's that note. Now in the next second, oh, there's another note, but there's also another note at the same time. And writing out like this very, very slowly, painstakingly, hours and hours and hours. And then learning that. And through that, and then listening again and playing with the recordings and learning it and playing it. And eventually I had the ability to recite the music, not as a first language speaker, but somebody who understands the accent of a language and has learned some poetry and can go to a party, and says French poetry. But, and then another 10 years of playing that music all the time, be it in concerts, be it at home, and then having the good fortune to suddenly find myself on stages with kora players from the Gambia, from Mali, from Senegal, even a kora player from London, Tunde Jegede, who learned by going to the Gambia when he was a young boy. So, yeah, this kind of process. And I'm still going. I'm still trying to learn. Now I'm on tour with Baleke for a year or two, on and off. And this is somebody who is just, every cell of his body is this music. When he was 12 years old, he took his father's seat in the National Ensemble of Mali, next to the father of Tumani Diabate. His father passed away, Baleke's father, and he took over at 12 and sat in this ensemble, which was created to represent this new nation, this new Malian nation, this independent Mali. So, and he hasn't stopped for 40 years. He's been touring, he's played with everybody.
Derek, just hearing you describe this process, it needs a lot of discipline, it needs a lot of dedication because of not the hours, but just the years, the decades that you've put into it. What was your motivation? What pushed you through all of that? Again, because it would have been easy just to say, oh, well, yeah, it sounds nice, traditional harp, and moving on. But in many ways, through your work, you've mainstreamed that sound.
Yeah, I think discipline is kind of overrated. We can only do so much with discipline. Like, you get a new job or you've got some project and then you think, I've got to do this. And you push yourself and you say, I'm going to do 3 hours a day. You can do so much. But if you really want to unleash the kind of inner power that we all have, you have to be kind of obsessed. It's like an inner driven thing where
you say kind
what you
of.
have to do. Yes.
Only kind of, Derek.
You have to be kind of obsessed, and like the obsession to learn it and to transcribe it. I don't have that anymore. Like to do that fine detailed work, that's not my obsession anymore, because that part of the project is over. Now there's other things. So if you told me, oh, here's a new chorus solo, I want you to create a finely detailed score with every note, I would have to discipline myself. It would be painful, because I would be like, oh, but at the time, that discovery and that moment of hearing it and then going onto the guitar, that was just an absolute joy, And then you only had 3 seconds, so then you had to keep going. And then you only had one piece, and so you had to keep going. So there was nothing could stop me then, And I think that's the real human energy that it's important to unleash and to find. Like, what are you passionate about? What is something that you want to do that you can't do? And I think, we live in a culture where everybody's told, just stick to it, put your nose to the grindstone and you'll get results. I don't know. I work it the other way. I sort of find where the interest is, where the passion is, and then I allow myself to do those things, if I'm lucky enough to have that space and ability.
I would imagine that it also requires you being able to open yourself up to the world and to different things. Growing up in Cape Town and, being in South Africa, perhaps particularly, South Africans are often accused of being quite inward looking, focusing on just what's happening in this country, forgetting that we may be on the southern tip, but there is an entire other continent with at least 55 states, and there's a world of possibilities, opportunities, and things to learn and discover.
Balake and I were talking about this before the concert last night with our Google Translate. And there is an established music industry, especially in America, because of the way America is set up. 50 countries with borders, no borders, and the same language, same music, and it's affluent. So the music industry thrives in an environment like that. It's much harder in any other country of the world. Be it South Africa, be it another African country, even Europe. It's different. And we talked about the importance of that we both felt that we wanted to play more on the African continent. He has worked for 30, 40 years in Europe, living part-time in Paris, going home when he can. And he said as well, he's so happy to be here in South Africa, playing on the African continent. He wants to play elsewhere, more. And I've met people since my project that have been interested in the Kora or Malian music. Let's say in American, I've met many Americans, and they do an interesting thing. They get on the plane and they go to Mali and they find a teacher. And that never occurred to me. I didn't think of that as a possibility. I just felt it was so far, so remote, Okay, I didn't have American dollars in my pocket and cheap airlines from America, the connections, 20 years ago from here to Mali were difficult. I had children. But there's that sense of distance that has been created, I think, through our history.
Yeah.
And I think, and also just creating ways of playing and of doing that, because there aren't these established circuits. I mean, there are the beautiful festivals like the Bushfire Festival, Haifa in Harare, which was just incredible, the Lake of Stars. There are these moments in the Southern Africa where you can. But we were both last night, we were like, yes, we want to get these concert routes going where we can actually go and play, in the rest of the continent. And we can go to Europe once or twice a year, but not all the time.
that would be absolutely lovely. But I guess, on the other end, it's you've got to follow the money, I guess, follow the opportunities. And that's something we can explore a bit more of with Derek Gripper, classical guitarist and specializes in the Kora music of Mali. We'll continue the conversation with him shortly.
Well, the headlines at 11:30. I am Dineo Motaung. Good morning. IEC Commissioner Dr. Nomsama Suku has been granted 20,000 rand bail by the Specialized Commercial Crimes Court sitting in the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court. The 62-year-old was arrested earlier this morning by the Hawks for fraud amounting to 1.2 million rand. In other news, 4 people have been killed in a horrific collision between a truck and SUV vehicle on the R81 road in Mweketi, Limpopo. And 1 person has reportedly been killed and more than 30 injured in yesterday's widespread protests in Kenya against proposed tax increases. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Unlock a world of benefits. Welcome to SABC's TV License Rewards program. Ready to make your viewing experience more rewarding? Say hello to perks that go beyond just watching TV. Join us today at sabctvlicenserewards.co.za and instantly receive your first reward. But wait, there's more. You can get up to 500 Rand back. Become part of something bigger, a movement where watching TV isn't just a hobby. It's a catalyst for positive change. Register now at sabctvlicenserewards.co.za and open the door to a world of benefits. Plus, every time you tune in, you're making a difference. T's and C's apply. Remember, TV license fees aren't just payments. They make a difference.
Durban is open for business and investment. A large delegation from the United States of America, including captains of industry, business, investors, finances, decision makers, and high-profile leaders will attend the 2024 Resurgence Durban Conference to explore and maximize investment opportunities in Durban. Be part of the Resurgence Durban Conference taking place at the Durban ICC from the 17th to the 21st of July 2024. Durban is forging ahead with its plan of action that is aimed at boosting trade and investments within South Africa, the African continent, and the rest of the world. Businesses must register now to exhibit at the conference. Closing date is the 30th of June 2024. To register for the Resurgence Durban Conference and for more information, visit www.resurgenceconference.org.
Hey, what's up, South Africa? Mzansi, Msizi Shembe from Metro FM. Do join me on Saturday at 6 p.m. as I'll be on Deal or No Deal Celebrity. Looking forward to see you there.
SAFM Youth Month Takeover. SAFM invites young people between the ages of 18 to 35 to take over the airwaves this Youth Month. All you have to do is send a WhatsApp voice note or text message to 061-410-4107 or email info@safm.co.za. Tell us which show you'd like to co-host and what the 2 compelling issues facing our 30 years of democracy are, and we could be calling you. Terms and conditions apply. The Friday Wind Down. Kick off your weekend the right way.
Moss on the Mountain by Derek Gripper and Balake Sissoko. And of course, David Gripper is our guest for the Friday Wind Down today, a classic guitarist. And as you heard, they're part of the collaboration then, and that has been put together in that album. But they're also in the country together. They've been on a tour, and they'll soon. I think you Derek, you said you're on tour for a year with Balake. How long are you going to be in South Africa for?
No, we're not continuously for a year.
Okay.
We both, do our own thing, but we meet up from time to time. And I suppose we started this process at the end of 2022 in London, where we recorded this record that you just heard.
Yeah.
And then last year we played in Turkey and Switzerland, Sweden and France. And then we've just been in the US together for a few weeks. We played on the East Coast, about 7 shows. And then Balake went back home, and he's got a quartet, and he's got a lot of other projects that he's doing. And then we met up in Cape Town. We had a little artist retreat for a few days, and then we went to Durban. We played at the Playhouse in Durban and in the Midlands. And then we went back to Cape Town. We had 2 marvelous shows at the Baxter Concert Hall. Just so wonderful for me to, bring Balake home to, the venue I've been playing in for most of my playing life. And now we're in the last leg. We just played Wits last night at the Chris Seabrook. And then tonight we will play the Market Theatre, and Saturday 2 shows at the Market Theatre.
So, Derek, you and Balake then have known each other for a couple of years. You said you don't speak any French. So, explain to me, how does it all work? Communicating, talking about what needs to be done, how it needs to be done.
Balake said it quite eloquently. He says it's the feeling that's most important, and if you have the good feeling about somebody, and then the words aren't that important. So as far as the music goes, it's quite a nice project because we don't discuss music, we don't rehearse, and we don't make any decisions. So every time we sit on stage, it's completely new, and we do what we like. I was telling you about
Are you
following
kidding me?
the passions. So we don't, and that album is completely, there was no discussion. We sat down for 2.5 hours, and we played continuously. And we didn't discuss beforehand, we didn't discuss during, and we didn't discuss afterwards. So that's how we work all the time. So, if you come to the concert 3 nights, you'll see 3 completely different things happening. We can do that because we have a shared knowledge of the repertoire. I've got 2.3% of it, and he's got 172% of the kora repertoire.
Yeah.
But then he also intuitively understands the other things that I bring, and he has this marvelous modern kora that can change key very easily, because the old kora, it was hard. Leather tuning rings move up and down. So he's got these switches that he can just change, so he can hear what key I'm in, and he can flip his strings into that, and then off we go. Then we use Google Translate to work out what time to meet in the lobby, what he would like for breakfast, and to discuss the finer points of life and our family and what they're doing, and that works quite well.
That is
and he
quite
started
magical.
to teach me some Bambara.
Yeah, it's absolutely quite magical. Just even you describing it the way that it is, you guys then must really share something that is quite special in the music. The fact that you don't rehearse, the fact that you didn't have conversations about this is how the album must go. Yeah, I'm quite dumbstruck by that, actually. Janusz, you're calling us from Cape Town. Good morning.
Cathy, good morning. It's a wonderful, splendid music. It's something really, fantastic. I've got a guitar standing there in the corner. From time to time, I'm trying to play, but my fingers are too soft, so it's very painful exercise. to go back to the guitar. But what is your opinion? Because there is, many classical musicians, when you play in Philharmonic or others, they've got a different opinion about others. I grew up on the guitar, of sort of listening to the guitar, Jimi Hendrix and other musicians. They are also fantastic, but sometimes this classical musical guy, they treat them a little bit down. But also the technique. Tell me about. I thought some different the technique and some movies about playing the guitar when you're actually not using the fingers as such, but you're hitting the string, and the sound of this is also fantastic. Do you think that you're gonna go something further? How far are we gonna go? Did you play in Poland, by the way?
I've never played in Poland. It's funny you say about your guitar and hurting your fingers. I thought once that it would be good to have an NGO that traveled to people's houses and saw their guitars and helped them, because so much of the time people think they can't play because they have a guitar that's unplayable. That's the action, the distance between the string and the fretboard is too high, or we set it up well so that it's easy. So that's the first thing. If you play one note and it's hard on your left hand, don't think, I must practice now. No, it mustn't be hard, or I must build up muscle. No, you mustn't build up muscle. It must be easy. So you have to bring it down. You take it to a guitar person, or the simple way is just tune it lower, so that the strings are slacker. And then, if it's a steel string, your fingers do get a little bit sore. I remember when I played bass guitar, we used to put, what's that purple stuff? Methylated spirits we used to put on the ends of our fingers, and that actually makes them hard, Now my fingers can be soft and I still don't feel anything. Like if I haven't played for a while, it still doesn't hurt. I think the nerves are dead. They just don't communicate anymore.
Derek, where were you 20 years ago? My uncle gifted me his old bass guitar, and he thought that I was going to become a guitarist, but my fingers hurt too much while trying to learn how to play, and I thought it just, it's not for me. It's not going to work.
No, you just stick it out 1 week and your fingers. I remember that when I was playing bass guitar, and it's sore. The first little while, it's really sore.
I've got a message
and
here
it's like a kind of small sore,
Absolutely,
small sore is sometimes worse than big sore.
It
it's
really,
like
really is. It really, really is. I've got a message here from Chantal in Cape Town who says, Cathy, thank you. I'm enjoying the performance with Derek Gripper. I'm a huge fan. Jane says, thank you for the lovely interview. It's a nice change from the GNU talks. It's warming me up here in cold Cape Town, wishing Derek and his partner big success in all that they do. So, Derek, we're going to wrap up this interview now, but perhaps before you go, just an opportunity, 1 minute for you to tell us what it is you'll be getting up to.
Getting up to in the next few days, or in the next little more?
Up to you.
Up to me. Well, Balake and I, we've had this conversation through music, and we're slowly getting to know each other, and we realize that we enjoy playing. So we will play more together. We've got our market theatre shows, which are all sold out. Cape Town was all sold out. So thank you very much to South Africa, because, to bring him here is a highlight of my life. And it would have been just not the same if 3 people came. So the fact that we had absolutely jam-packed, sold-out shows everywhere, he has a great experience. It's wonderful. So I have to thank everybody for that. I know Balake and I will meet up again next year in January, I think. I don't know if we'll meet before again. We have a tour of the west coast of the US. I'm going to London on Monday to play some concerts in Oxford and London. And then I'm coming home for 2 months, and I don't want to go anywhere. And I'm going to play a guitar again and try and remember what that's like just to be at home, because I think it's been about 6 months. I've been in and out and really, really busy. So That's my plan.
Derek, thank you
some records.
And enjoy that time. Enjoy that 2 months off, but you must be truly off, right?
No, actually, I'm planning an Eastern Cape tour with Guy Buttery from Durban. We just chatted about it today. So we're going to do East London, George, Knysna, Port Elizabeth. So look out for that.
So not much of a break then for you.
It won't, but we'll just do a weekend. It won't be, like 7 days.
Okay.
This is
All
how
right.
it starts.
And then repeat the cycle over and over again. Derek, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Derek Gripper, a classical guitarist, and really wonderful being in conversation with him. That's where we wrap it up for today. And for the week, we'll be back with you again No, not tomorrow. I'm not coming in tomorrow. It's the weekend. So we'll be back again Monday morning. Enjoy your weekend. If you're traveling, be safe out on the roads.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of The Door, an addict's journey, read by Samson Khumalo.
I never prayed so hard that week, and clearly my pleas were going nowhere. My brother, my wife, and I were called aside and told that we should consider switching the machines off and that nothing further could be done for him. It was gut-wrenching news, and I cried hopelessly. I will never forget that day. It is forever etched in my mind. We asked for 2 days, wishing and hoping for a miracle. The doctors agreed. I'm sure they felt for us as a family. On June 16th, the whole family made what would be the last trip to the hospital. My wife went to his bedside and spoke to him. Someone had told us that even though he is brain dead, he could hear us. We surrounded that bed, held hands, and pleaded with God to forgive us where we had failed, and that we commit and dedicate Sbusiso to him. We prayed what is called the sinner's prayer, and I'll never forget the tear that formed on his little cheek as we prayed. We were told that sometimes when you switch the machines off, a patient may fight for themselves and the brain can effectively jumpstart itself back to life. And this offered to us a glimmer of hope. We watched machines the whole day, and just as our hopes were raised, he deteriorated. It became a traumatic yo-yo. We returned home, and at 4:40 p.m., got the news that Sbusiso Mariri was no more. This was tough to handle. Never in my wildest dream did I ever think this could happen to us as a family. We were distraught and riddled with pain. At the time of the news, I was with my mother in her kitchen with my brother and my sister Doris. It was indescribable, the pain in that room. We sent the message to all of our family far and wide, and the shocking news went viral. During the course of the week leading up to the June 16, I was dealing with many issues. My mother and I traced Busiso's steps and we spoke to his friends, but we got nowhere. We decided to go to the police station and try to find out about the case, and we were given the case number and the investigating officer. I was disappointed. We asked him several things, but it looked like he had done nothing or was just downright stupid. He could answer none of our questions coherently, and he smelled of alcohol, and we knew we wouldn't get anything out of him. I had to find out what had happened. In my hustling, I met a gentleman who was a captain of organized crime in Ekurhuleni. I approached him and asked him if there was anything that could be done to change that investigator to someone who could give us the details of what might have happened to Sbusiso. The docket was taken away from that incompetent policeman, and Majola handled it himself. We wanted to give Sbusiso a send-off befitting a young man his caliber. We got him a white casket and were touched by the number of young people that came to the funeral to pay their last respects. His body came home on a Friday afternoon in the casket to spend his last night with the family. We all said our goodbyes as the immediate family. During the course of the night, while his body was lying there in one of the bedrooms, I asked for some me time with him. I felt that this perhaps could bring me some sort of closure. I had spent so much time with him since he was a boy, and we carved a bond together. He knew I liked hunting wild game, and on one of my trips he had insisted I take him along. We laughed, sang, and talked about anything under the sun. I wanted just one last time to bid him farewell in my own way. I opened the casket and saw his still, quiet, and cold, icy face. I was speechless. How could it end up like this? On the 23rd of June, a week after his passing, as it is customary with the culture, we gathered early as a family before the cortege left for church and had a viewing in the morning. What a sad occasion. It left me numb, and I couldn't believe that this was it. And the final journey for him to his resting place had begun. He had just turned 19 years old. After the funeral, the captain kept on updating us and intimated that he was making progress. It appeared that Sbu had been seeing someone and a scuffle broke out, and it had been alleged that Sbu threw himself out the window. We got conflicting messages, and because Sbu was not there to speak for himself, it was a case of their word against his. Unfortunately, he was quiet in his grave. A suspect was arrested, and I went to court on a number of occasions, but charges were dismissed and my son died for nothing. Only God knows. My home was silent after the funeral. We never talked about it openly. If we did, it was just to reminisce about him and his smile, and then we would drop the subject almost immediately. My daughter took to her room and never talked, at least not to us. We never went for counseling. For me, the matter was eating me alive. I had failed this young man dismally. I took the blame and bottled a lot inside. My behavior was getting out of hand. I buried myself in my work and decided to avoid the situation and started drinking heavily. I'd graduated from just wine and moved on to whiskey and single malts and would combine everything, including beer. Not long after Sbusiso's death, I got a call from my sister telling me our brother wasn't well. I was on my way to Cape Town, but assured her I would go to see him as soon as I returned. I did that, and I was shocked at how frail he was. He could hardly move. This was literally 2 months after Sibusiso had passed on. My brother was working with me by then. I had secured a contract from a subsidiary of SAA and was supplying them with transport. I had a fleet of buses and had asked my brother to come work with me and that I would pay him whatever he wanted. His marriage was not going well either. We were truly a dysfunctional family. He came to me on so many occasions to complain about his home, and I would always encourage him to make it work. He became more and more withdrawn, and he never ever told me what was eating him. He would fall asleep during the day, and he would tell me he lacked the energy and strength to get up and walk. I would tell him to stay put and I will fill in for him. I didn't mind. He was my brother and I loved him. I would do anything in the world for him. But it became more frequent. He was forever tired and I started to worry about him. I figured it was Sbu's death that was taking its toll on him. But when I went to see him after my trip to Cape Town, he couldn't walk by himself and I had to help him. He asked me to back the car into his driveway so as to avoid the glare of the neighbors. He was a very private person and didn't want his business known by many people. My sister and I took him to hospital. I still didn't know what was wrong with him. I wondered if he was HIV positive, but the symptoms were not there, at least from the outside. He seemed fine and he was chubby and didn't have one symptom that I could pinpoint as HIV. He was diagnosed with leukemia, but he was also HIV positive. The doctor told me he was struggling to accept his status and was in denial. Joe would not allow himself to be humiliated. There was a lot of talk about AIDS and the stigma of having it. My brother couldn't deal with all that came with being positive. I picked him up at the hospital and he was recovering very well. On our way home, he disclosed his HIV status to me. I was speechless and encouraged him to just accept it, and then he would live longer. He never did that, and he was readmitted to hospital not long after when I was again in Cape Town. On my return, I went straight to the hospital, but as I was coming in, he was rushed to the theater and he didn't see me. He had this stare, and I tried to call his name, but he didn't respond like he usually did. I went home, but I couldn't sleep worrying about him. My mom called me at about 2 in the morning to tell me my brother didn't make it. I went straight to the hospital and found him covered with a white sheet. I removed the sheet to reveal his face, and there my brother was. Quiet and silent. I touched his body, and he was still a little warm, but you could tell there was no more life in him. He looked so peaceful and almost like he could wake up. I whispered in his ear my love for him and kissed him good night. Just as I had done with Sbusiso, he had asked me one night if I would pray with him. We had said the sinner's prayer. Not that I was any better. I was probably a far worse sinner than he was. After that, my heart was cold. I was angry at God. I was angry at the world. I did not care anymore. Did God even exist? I was deep in the bottle and drinking heavily, and the parties continued and the nightlife continued. Perhaps this was a way to drown my sorrows and deal with my madness. There was utter silence in the house, and any excuse to be away was welcomed with open arms. I was out partying and enjoying the nightlife and making money in the process. I was a wreck on the inside, even though I tried to cover it. Emotions do strange things to your head. If you don't give them space to breathe, they manifest in other ways. What I was suppressing was going to lead me down a path I never imagined myself on. Chapter 4. The Wrong Door. This whole drug thing, it's not a black thing, it's not a white thing, it's a death thing. Judd Nelson, New Jack City. One of the things I liked about the church I attended in Davidton was the fact that it was community conscious. Various initiatives were taken, and I drove some of them in an effort to empower and encourage young people. This was to encourage young people to dream and believe in themselves. I even facilitated a drug awareness day. I'm not sure why I did this. Perhaps it was because of my relationship with Hugh Masekela that I came to know about drugs and what addiction was doing to our youth. I invited Hugh to church, and not only did he agree to come, he was even prepared to rehearse with a local band and performed with them at a Sunday morning service. This was extraordinary. I mean, Hugh is no doubt a legend, and yet he was prepared to come to church and work with us on this significant work. I worked with him and then subsequently brought in the likes of Tsepo Tsula, Kabelo Mabalani, Chico Twala, and many more. I never thought at the time that one day I would be fighting for my life in an effort to recover from the scourge of drugs and drug dependence.
That was another episode of The Door, an addict's journey, written by Abner Mariri. The book is available on www.abner.africa. It is broadcast on SAFM at 11:45 Monday to Thursday on The Talking Point. It is produced for the station by Vovi Patala, read by Samson Kumalo, technical production by Nanda Koza.
It's after 12 o'clock. It's Friday, the 21st of June, 2024. A very warm welcome to Update at Noon here on SAFM. Leading the conversation, I'm Sakina Kamwendo. Coming up in the next hour,
we have noted the judgment in the case between Eskom and City Power that was issued yesterday. We obviously do not agree with it, and we reserve the right to appeal.
Well, City Power seeks to appeal a court order demanding that it pays Eskom 3.4 billion rand by the end of business today, and
he's currently in prison for 13 years. Now, 13 years for 3 murders. Murders of 3 innocent little children is not justice. I do not think the community in this country wants more child murderers.
Former Cape Town police officer and convicted murderer Marius van der Westhuizen granted parole after killing his 3 children. Meanwhile, coming up in sport,
what a weekend this weekend. We got the Springboks, we got the Proteas, we got the Blitzboks, and we got Euros 2004. Details coming up.
Well, lots of sport to look forward to with John Gericke later on in the show. We also want to hear from you, so please get in touch. 41391 is the SMS line number. You'll be charged R1.50 per SMS. You can also write to us via X or Facebook, our handle at SABC News _radio, using the hashtag #UpdatedNoon. Alternatively, a voice note will do 082-692-3909. All these and more stories coming up on this Friday edition of Updated Noon. First, though, here's your latest news with Dineo Mohlahlana.
Thank you, Sakina. Top stories. IEC Commissioner Nomsama Suku arrested for fraud and 1 dead, scores injured in Kenya tax protests. Good afternoon. IEC Commissioner Dr. Nomsama Suku has been granted 20,000 rand bail by the Specialized Commercial Crimes Court sitting in the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court. The 62-year-old was arrested earlier this morning by the Hawks for fraud amounting to 1.2 million rand. She was also a former employee at Standard Bank, and as head of the bank's CSI program for the Adopt a School Trust, she allegedly flaunted processes by awarding scholarships to friends and family members. Masuku had also allegedly deposited some of the monies into a personal bank account without the approval of the trust committee. The matter has been postponed to the 4th of September. In other news, 4 people have been killed in a horrific collision between a truck and a SUV vehicle on the R81 road in Mogeti, Limpopo. Transport Department spokesperson Didima Lochweni says a passenger in the vehicle sustained serious injuries while the truck driver sustained minor injuries. Chweni says the deceased were occupants, including the driver of the SUV vehicle.
All those who passed away were passengers from the Cherry Tiggo. 1 person survived from the Cherry Tiggo with serious injuries, and the driver of the Tata truck is reported to have sustained minor injuries. Police are investigating the cause of the accident. As a department, we are saddened by the incident and send our condolences to the bereaved families. We also wish those who sustained injuries a speedy recovery.
Moving to the northwest, COSATU in the province has lambasted the ANC for allegedly failing to consult with its alliance partners before going ahead with pronouncing the Provincial Executive Council. COSATU says it views the conduct of the ANC leadership as disrespectful and abusive of the relations alliance partners have in the province. COSATU's Provincial Secretary Kopano Kunupi says the ANC has been called on to convene an urgent political council to clarify the matter.
We were convened in a number of meetings, one on Tuesday and the other one was yesterday, of which it was abruptly cancelled while we were waiting for us to be called inside the meeting. We want to remind the ANC that it has been the tradition since 2021 that the alliance has been consulted when people who are going into the positions of political deployment are being appointed. We did this with municipal councils, we did this recently with the appointment of the Premier. We are now surprised when there's an appointment of MEC. The ANC fails to consult us.
In the Eastern Cape, the Liquor Board has called on communities to assist in preventing underage drinking. This after the board received reports of high levels of underage drinking in Mthatha, Buffalo City and Nelson Mandela Bay. The call comes just a few days before the 2nd anniversary of the Enyobeni Tavern tragedy, where 21 teenagers died after attending a pens down event. Eastern Cape Liquor Board spokesperson Ngwebi Msia.
Our focus really is more on these 3 areas to ensure that we conduct also regular inspections. These liquor outlets are based in the communities, and communities would know what is actually taking place with regards to how, they conduct themselves, etc. So we also try our best to mobilize different stakeholders within communities so that they can also become part of our efforts to promote responsible trading, but also to prevent underage drinking in these areas.
Lastly, 1 person has reportedly been killed and more than 30 injured in yesterday's widespread protests in Kenya against proposed tax increases. The young protesters argue that tax hikes will hurt the economy and burden Kenyans struggling to make ends meet. The BBC's Ansoy reports.
it's usually controversial. Last year, there were similar protests led by the opposition leader Raila Odinga, but those protests were quashed and also ignored, and it sailed through despite their opposition. This year, the politicians are staying on the sidelines. It is the young people, the Gen Zs, who have gone out to the streets. They have been analyzing this finance bill on social media, on TikTok. They've posted videos, they are translating it, and they've created so much awareness among this demographic, and that is what motivated them to come out to the streets to protest.
Recapping the top story this hour, IEC Commissioner Dr. Nomsama Suku has been granted 20,000 rand bail by the Specialized Commercial Crimes Court sitting in the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court. She was arrested for fraud relating to her time as an employee at Standard Bank. Headlines at 12:30 for SAFM News. I am Dino Motaung. For now, Sakina is on standby with Update at noon.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m. Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo.
Well, thanks, Dineo. Good afternoon, everybody. It's 10 minutes after 12. Thanks so much for tuning in to Update at Noon. Just a quick look at some of the stories that we'll be following up on this afternoon. You heard us speak to hashtag Pay the Grants yesterday about some glitches in terms of the payment of the SRD grants, and now that there is further requirement with regard to biometric verification. So we did promise that SASSA would come on today. So we'll speak to Paseka Letsatsi just to get a response from them from what was said yesterday. And then student evictions. Frustrated landlords have evicted students, and this during exam time, claiming that NSFAS has not paid them rent for months. And this despite NSFAS having appealed to the landlords not to evict the students who have outstanding payments. You'll remember they also promised to resolve all legitimate claims by June the 18th. Well, June the 18th has come and gone, and some landlords have still not received their accommodation allowances, and this has resulted in students being evicted. So we're trying to follow up there with NSFAS to find out what is going on. And then Eskom, they stated that they obtained a court order on Thursday against the city of Johannesburg, demanding that the Metro settle its debt of over R1 billion, which has escalated to 3.4 billion rand due to interest. Eskom has written a letter to the city and to City Power demanding the payment of the full amount of 3.4 billion rand by today. That's June the 21st. And we are going to try and follow up to find out exactly where things are right now between City Power and, of course, Eskom, whether they've managed to come to some sort of resolve or whether the city will contest this in any other way. And also staying in Johannesburg, Joburgers are bracing for water supply interruptions from Saturday. That's tomorrow until the end of next month. Randwater is embarking on an intense maintenance program. And coming up from Cape Town, the former cop Marius van der Westhuizen has been granted parole for the 2006 murder of his 3 children. And he appeared before the parole board on Tuesday at the Malmesbury Correctional Centre. His former wife, Charlotte, has opposed this parole, so we'll be speaking to her attorney in a short while. So these are some of the stories. Of course, the court story is also ongoing. John's coming up with the sport, and it is, of course, a Friday, and we will be checking in with Martin Creamer for another update from the coalface.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM.
12 minutes after 12 now. Charlotte van der Westhuizen, the wife of a child killer and former cop Marius van der Westhuizen, says that she does not believe that the country needs another child murderer out in the public. And this comes after her former husband and father of her children, Marius, is set to be released on parole at the end of July. The former police officer was granted parole after his 3rd appearance before the parole board at the Malmesbury Correctional Centre on Tuesday. He murdered his children who were aged 16, 5 and 21 months old at their home in 2006 in what was said at the time an effort to punish his wife, Charlotte. But for more on what's been happening here and the latest developments, we're joined on the line by Charlotte's lawyer, Gerard of Niekerk. Gerard, good afternoon and thanks so much for your time.
Yes, Asanda, good afternoon to you and all the listeners. In fact, I'm sitting here alongside Charlotte van der Westhuizen, so she will also be available to answer any questions. And yes, we are glad that we can speak to you. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to Charlotte as well. So this, of course,
Good
is
afternoon,
story.
Asanda.
Hi, Charlotte and Gerard, it is Sakina. We are now live on air. Asanda is our producer, yes. Thanks so much for speaking to us. So let me just start because, this was a story that obviously captured the imagination back in 2006 in the most horrendous way. So perhaps if we can just go back as a reminder for those who may have forgotten or are not quite au fait with what had happened, Charlotte. I'm loath to do this to you, but maybe just, take us back to what had happened, which informs, of course, why you are opposing this parole application.
Okay, so there was a history of domestic violence in our marriage. It was his second marriage, and we had the 3 children. On the 23rd of March 2006, he held the children hostage in the house, and I could escape the house with the little one, with Nettie Betty, Antoinette, and with my mom and my dad. And then he assaulted my dad. He indicated that I must choose between my parents and him. I had taken out an interdict, domestic violence related interdict against him. On the 10th of May 2006, when the interdict were to become permanent, we sat there and I said, I don't want to go further with the case because you're scared. Marius is well conversed. He's manipulative. He's narcissistic. He comes over very intelligent and well-spoken, unlike me. And on the 10th of May 2006, I withdrew the interdict without my commanders knowing that. On the 28th of July 2006, Marius van der Westhuizen walked from child to child, shot them each in the head, and each time he mentioned, Sinja, jou kinders is nou dood. He gave me a choice. He said I must choose between him and my work. It emanated from that day that I was working in uniform on Footbeat in Kuils River in the main road. As it was the end of the month, then we always tried to be visible. And I didn't adhere to his rules. I was not allowed to wear uniform. I did wear uniform as I am a police officer myself. And I was not allowed, according to him, to work outside. I worked outside because as a leader, I believe to lead from the front. And that night it was hell to pay. And because I stood up to him, and I stood up to him more and more. And then when I mean stood up to him, I don't mean physically, I mean emotionally, financially. He realized that he couldn't break me, and the worst thing that he can do now is to murder my children. So he said, you must choose me or the work, meaning SAPS. And I told him it's not a question of choosing. He's my husband, my work is my work. My work is not a 9 to 5, Monday to Sunday, Monday to Friday jobbie. I'm a police officer. And I think he should have been proud of me and of all my work that I did. So then he started shooting Bianca. And he said, Sinja, jy het jou keuse gemaak, jy sal die gevolge dra. You made your choice, you'll have to carry the consequences. Daarna het hy Antoinette geskiet. Then he walked to the next room. He shot and killed Boetiekie, Marius Eben. And then he handed me my phone and he locked me inside the house so that I can phone colleagues for help. And I was locked inside my house where I had to go back and see if the children were still alive. I could see that the children was dead, bleeding profusely. The reason why I did it is because I did not listen to him. Marius wanted me to agree with everything he said, just like in a police office, where in the police, if the senior talk, you follow the instructions. Unfortunately, at home, it doesn't work that way. He was unhappy with the way that I dressed. I had my uniform on. He was unhappy with me working after hours. He would lock away the children's Easter eggs in the fire safe so that I cannot get off the Easter eggs. He would go with me to the supermarket, and I was only allowed to buy what was on the list. If there's something I wanted to buy for the children and it's not on the list, it was a no-can-do. We did not have financial problems. The only debt we had was the house bond. And he also took away my credit card to take away all, to have power over me. He forbid my parents to come to the house. He hide away the keys so that I couldn't get to work. My colleagues had to come and fetch me. And I didn't fall for it anymore. And the more and more I stood up against him, the more and more it became dangerous. And that is why he murdered my children, because my children was my Achilles heel. My children is my future, was my future. He murdered my future. And even up until today, I will not stay quiet. I've testified against him in the High Court. And I will never stay quiet. Although I know every time that I speak, it becomes more and more dangerous. Nobody can tell me that Marius van der Westhuizen is not dangerous. I can give you 3 reasons how dangerous he is. He shot innocent little children. 13 years in prison, that gives you an average of 4 years per child. Is that now the new norm, where crimes against women and children is the buzzword? I don't want to hear buzzwords. I'm sick and tired of lip service. I want to see that the parole system is renovated and becomes much more victim-orientated, less than perpetrator-orientated. Thank you.
Charlotte, do you fear for your life should Marius be released?
Yes, most definitely, because Marius is very current. He's manipulative. Dr. Larissa Paneri-Peter testified in the High Court after they evaluated him in Valkenburg that he was the worst case of narcissism that they had yet had, and that, a narcissist does not have empathy. And even the past Tuesday, he was talking about his loved ones, how they suffer, and what he's now going to do when he gets out of prison. There was no indication towards what he did to the children. It is as if he has got no regard for their life, no respect. They were just means a way to a means for him. He didn't even once refer to the children. I do not believe in the rehabilitation system of the parole system. You can ask Carmen Gous that, but we can't. She was murdered by a parolee. You can ask Tasnay van Wyk that, but we can't. She was murdered by a parolee. So I've got no confidence in the parole system at all.
Speaking about the rehabilitation efforts that correctional services would generally undertake, was there an attempt for you and Marius to speak at any point, perhaps to try and get him to apologize to you at the very least for what had happened?
You're referring to the victim-offender dialogue?
Correct.
My psychologist said that she's not happy that I have to sit in the same room with him. I could also see with the parole hearings that nothing has changed. You know, it's 18 years later. It's a he says, she says. Even on Tuesday, I said, I'll take all the blame. I'll take all the blame, you know, in that manner where he shrugged his shoulders. You can see he has got no inclination of what he did. And I could see that it's not going to help talking to him. And my psychologist also advised me not to do that with him because that will be psychologically to my detriment.
If I can bring Gerard in for a moment. Gerard, the reasons that have been advanced by the authorities for granting parole to Marius, what are they saying?
Well, we have asked them for reasons. We haven't gotten the reason, but I want to make a few remarks which I think is pertinent to the whole question of parole. I think, firstly, what bothered